There's always been an innovation economy, and JP Morgan has an entire business dedicated to helping it thrive. By bringing together founders, startups, investors, and ideas, JP Morgan's commercial bank helps empower thousands of high-growth companies that are shaping the present and the future. With tailored banking solutions and a global business network, JP Morgan helps innovators scale for today and tomorrow. Visit jpmorgan.com/startups to find out how they can help build your future.
Hey everyone, welcome to TechCrunch Live, where we help founders build better venture-backed businesses. I'm Matt Burns, and today's event continues this month's theme on mobility startups. And today we're speaking on raising huge amounts of capital to fund the development of self-driving vehicles. And who better to speak on this topic? Well, it's Raquel Urtasun, CEO of Waabi, who served as the chief scientist at Uber's Advanced Technology Group and then left to raise $82 million Series A to get Waabi up and running. She brought along her pitch deck, and we're going to walk through a few of those slides, and they're fantastic. Joining her is Sven, Strohband, partner at Khosla Ventures, who led Waabi's Series A. Now, this is going to be a great event today. There's a lot to pull out of this pitch deck and the lessons Raquel learned along the way. And like always, after today's interview, we're going to bring on 3 different startups for pitch practice. The instructions to apply are in Hop-In. Please apply now. The Mobility Fund doesn't end here. Next week in San Mateo, TechCrunch is hosting our 2-day mobility event called Sessions Mobility. This means TechCrunch Live is taking next week off, but we're going to be back the following week with this great story of New Brakes. It's a story about starting small and then building up to something great. And now they're at the point where they're replacing brakes in people's driveways. But first, we have Waabi. Raquel, Sven, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, great. So Waabi's goal is to bring self-driving trucks to the world. And your company came out of stealth in 2019 with a massive $87 million round. But at the time, there was already established players quickly advancing that technology. What gave you confidence in 2019 that you weren't behind?
Thanks for the question. Actually, it was 2021 that we came
2021, or even better, yes.
Yeah, very, very recently. So, the more that I work in self-driving in the industry, the more it became clear that the industry is asymptoting, far from the solution that will really bring this technology at the scale, and that there is a need for a different approach, different technology to get us really there. And what's the best way to, really execute on a new vision is to start afresh a new company. And that's the reason why I founded Waabi.
Mm-hmm. And Sven, what gave you the confidence that there was room for one more player in this market?
So in a past life, I used to actually build self-driving cars. And so I'm intimately familiar with how high of a burden it is to actually build a good one. And in 2005, after the Grand Challenge finished, we actually had a bet amongst the team if we were going to have self-driving cars in 10 years. And it turned out, well, we didn't. 10 years passed and we still didn't have any self-driving cars. And it really came from the fact that the teams got bigger and bigger, and more corner cases needed to be solved. And it turns out each incremental corner case took longer and longer to solve. So I was really looking for a different approach. And in walked Raquel, who was clearly a known entity in the field that had what I considered a much better approach.
And Raquel, why don't you tell us about that approach?
Sure. So the way that we approach in self-driving is with an AI-first approach, where basically is really unleashing the full power of AI to solve this problem, meaning that is end-to-end trainable, where you can really jointly deploy the entire software stack, as well as a next generation simulation system that enables you to develop this technology in a much faster, safer, and cost-effective manner, and no need to rely on driving millions of miles, in the real world to really make progress. And to Sven's point, right, is that, typical approaches, every issue that you see, every corner case, you need to add one more level of complexity to a hand engineer approach. Instead, is bringing AI to the front line to really automate this process and enable you to do a much more holistic, simpler approach.
And then what Sven said is you were a known quantity in this industry. I think that's doing you a disservice. You're quite the rock star in this industry, actually, right? And you're smiling and blushing because you know it's true. And it seems to me you raised this $82 million Series A basically on your name and promise. Is that right?
I think there were a couple of things that were very attractive for investors. And, Sven can give his 2 cents about what for him in particular was exciting. I think the name indeed play an important role on this. But also the team that, it was not just me, it was an incredible, team that has been at the forefront of innovation in self-driving for the past few years. So that was very, very important, as well as this vision of this new technology was a very clear technological roadmap of what we need to execute in order to bring this technology to scale. And, the fact that we had external validators that will really say that indeed, the team and myself were at the forefront. I think, all this together form a pretty exciting package for, our investors.
Yes, Sven, give me your take on that.
I think Raquel summarized it really, really well. So this wasn't just Raquel. This was Raquel plus a really great team that Raquel knew for quite some time. And also, one thing that really resonated with me was I was really a little bit frustrated that we hadn't made more progress in self-driving for really quite some time. So this approach was a big deal. This was a chance to kind of cut through the clutter, basically, and not asymptote on the performance of these systems. And so that was a very, very attractive part of the proposition here.
Mm-hmm. And your team keeps on getting bigger. You just hired a whole bunch of new people recently, right?
Yeah, definitely. We have utilized, part of that amazing capital we raised into growing the team. And, the core team was, AI experts that both researchers and engineers that deploy several generations of technology into production. And now we have, commercialization. We have an amazing hardware team that we just announced, etc. So we are, attracting the best in class of the industry to continue growing Waabi.
Mm-hmm. And so you raised this 82 million in 2021. How much runway did that give you?
So if you think about why we raised this quantum, oftentimes people ask me, oh, it's a lot, it's too little, depending on who you talk to. So the quantum was selected such that, we had a clear roadmap into what we needed to execute, for, I would say a couple of years, right? And that's, how, the 83 million came to be the capital that makes sense for us. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so we have, good runway, which, turns out to be, important potentially now since the markets are a little bit crazy, right? And at the same time for us, it's just, we want to just heads down and execute, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's take a look at the deck. I think this deck is really interesting. And to me, it screams, I'm going to make you a lot of money. It seems very well positioned to do that, right? So when you look at the first slide, everything is clean and tight, but at the same time, it really goes back to how this is going to return a return for the investors. So if we can bring up that first slide. There we are. And Raquel, I was hoping you could just talk us through this first slide and what's the purpose of it and how it came to be.
Sorry to interrupt, but I would say, I think on the very first slide, the thing that stuck out to me the most really is this is solving a very important problem. So this is genuinely an important problem. There's a lot of deaths on the road to traffic accidents and all of that. So for us at Khosla Ventures, we often search for things that are early, bold, and impactful, and that does indeed resonate. So this is genuinely solving an important problem, and so it's not only going to make a lot of money, hopefully, but it's also a genuinely important problem for humanity to solve.
I got to push back there, but there's a bunch of other companies that are doing the same thing. So what made this stick out?
The thing that stuck out is that it has a good shot of actually solving the problem. So the problem is a big problem, is like an important problem to solve, but many people have tried and the progress has been, let's say, slow. So this has a shot at actually solving the problem. And so that's the attractive bit here.
All right, Raquel, let's take a look at this first slide.
Sure. So I guess, the first slide, what, to Sven's point, right? So first of all, this is an important problem in the sense that, we all understand, the need for safety in our roads. We all understand supply chain being an issue. Before it was an issue maybe for a few, now it's an issue for everybody, right? So it's obvious that automation has an incredible potential to make our lives better, right? So it's definitely going to transform, society in a better way. At the same time, there is a big TAM, right? There is an amazing, from the economic perspective, if you solve this at scale, which is what we're talking about here, not a pilot, but really solving the problem, potentially you're gonna make a lot of money. And as Sven mentioned as well, right, is, so yes, we're, trying to solve an important problem, but also you need to have a solution that is differentiated from everybody else, and a solution that people are going to believe that indeed you have a real shot to solve this. And, in his case, he experienced, the more traditional approaches. He understands the pain points of why this is asymptotic to the wrong place, right? How difficult it is, with these very large teams and these overly complex software stacks to really, and the lack of automation to really make progress day by day, and how what we propose here is really, a solution to those problems, right? And I think that in that sense, what we are proposing is a faster, safer, and cheaper solution to self-driving, which I think resonates really, really well as well with investors. Right?
Now, Sven seems like the perfect investor for you. How many investors did you meet before you got to him?
So I will say that we were, pretty selective with a set of investors. The first thing that we did was actually map who do we want to talk to. And the consideration that is, who do we believe that first, yes, can write, a big check because it was a big Series A, but at the same time, someone that will be an amazing partner into building this company. Oftentimes people talk about fundraising as who can give you the money, but that's really not the most important thing. Is who will, make your company or maximize the probability of success of your company. From that perspective, we look at a combination of 3 different things that were important for us. We wanted, a investor that was, in deep tech, that really understand the AI, that will really understand our value proposition. And Khosla Ventures is definitely a canonical example of, as I call it, the Ferrari of deep tech, right? At the same time, we wanted also investors that understand logistics, which is, our use case. So ABC, Uber, right, where, definitely very knowledgeable about logistics, and the Canadian thriving ecosystem, which, I care about Canada. I think it's, we are headquarters in Canada, and there is a lot of really exciting things happening. So that was, sort of like how we selected the set of investors. And as I said, there was a lot of kind of pre-work into having the right conversations, not wasting your time into conversations that potentially will not be interested or will not be a good investor for the company.
Yeah, that's a great point. That last point, Sven. Can you comment on wasting people's times and investors' meetings? Like, how do founders find the best investor for them?
I think Raquel is spot on. So you want a partner that helps you build the company. I mean, some people just want a check, but on average, I think it is much better if you find a partner that helps you build the company. And that means that investor ideally is comfortable with this space, knows a bit about this space, can help you with connections, but can also help you on the areas you might be weak at on the company building side, and has a bit of a track record of doing the type of companies that you are. So for example, for a deep tech company, it really helps to have done some deep tech things in the past, because they're financed differently, and you don't have revenue from day one, and it's not like a straight up MRR metric or something like that. Mm-hmm. It is a little bit of a different beast, and that can be quite helpful. And then the last thing I would say is you're kind of marrying this person for a while, for lack of a better word. So there's also a bit of a personal connection, which is, well, do I want to work with this person for probably the next, 7-8 years. And so that's a pretty big commitment. And that's maybe a slightly more personal part that plays a role.
Yeah, that's good feedback. Let's take a look at this first slide one more time, though. There's a lot of information on this. And generally, when we see slide decks, they're much more Spartan. But this one, there's a lot of different points on here. Did this work well for you? And would you do it again?
Yeah, I think this, oftentimes it worked well to have one slide that was a summary of everything. Because in the conversations, maybe that's the only thing that you actually show. So you kind of having those points up front were potentially a good idea. I think a lot of it is in the conversation, in the delivery, in the how you answer the questions. Whether they will be interested in the next meeting or investing in you, more than the slide deck itself. I will say, Sven, would you agree with me?
Yeah, absolutely. Although. It helps to have a prepared mind. So if your investor already knows about the problem and doesn't need to be educated about that this problem actually exists, you're already one step ahead, because at that point you can talk about how you could actually solve this problem. And so portions of the slide deck, I don't think Raquel needed to spend an awful lot of time on, because that was already something that we believed. So we could spend the time a little bit more fruitfully on, okay, so how are we actually going to solve this?
Yeah, no, Sven, this seemed like a kind of a slam dunk for you, but did you actually look at her slide deck?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Every slide deck.
Although I am with Raquel, the more important part, other than the slide deck, was the conversation I got to have with Raquel and team.
Did you guys do that in person, or was this COVID times?
All remote.
That was all remote.
Yeah, my investors in person only after the Bitcoin is financing.
Yeah,
that's interesting. All right, well, let's take a look at the second slide. And this one has your name all over, Raquel.
Yeah, indeed. And this was an interesting one for me, because for those that know me personally, I am actually pretty humble. And I don't like to talk about myself. And this is something that I learned from maybe the first, 2 or 3 pitches, is that I should not be humble. I should just, express, the why we are here, and, why they should be talking to us, and why we are excited. So this was an interesting one to, I guess, to get used to.
Yeah, I think I gathered all of that. Raquel is still really quite humble. Like even things like, one of the benchmarks in the industry is, for example, is Kitty. Everybody who works in self-driving knows Kitty. And so, well, that's Raquel's work. And so there's a bunch of stuff here that I think you're still quite humble about these things, despite this.
You guys are making me blush.
Well, I was hoping you could give some advice to founders out here about how to get themselves out there, right? And to really show their accomplishments. You've done a lot, and other people have done a lot too. What's the mindset you have to be in to show this off?
Yeah, so I think, for portraying myself, was important to portray sort of as a thought leader in the industry, right? And as the, forget about the humbleness, I guess, the lead innovator in the industry in self-driving, right? And what was interesting as well is to be a thought leader in both academia as well as industry, that brings something very, very unique to the table as well. Not only being able to, create new algorithms that are, beyond what we see, but also to be able to put them in production. So I think that was, something that resonated really nicely. And the other thing important, I guess, here was that, I care a lot about transparency and scientific methodology. And this is something that this industry is in need. And I think that also resonated pretty nicely with the investors. And Sven mentioned Kitty, right? This is just one example of, putting out there, both the benchmark as well as metrics, so that we can make progress. And there's so many incredible things that happen thanks to that benchmark, right? So the question here is as well, how can we make progress in self-driving by actually being much more transparent and truthful about, what is difficult versus easy.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's say you're not a professor of computer science at the University of Toronto, and you don't have 100 different patents. What would you put on something like this to get yourself out there? What type of accomplishments?
Yeah, I think it really depends on oneself. Like people are very different, right? Try to find what is the edge that makes you differentiate with respect to the rest, and make that sound very, very appealing. Why this is important for what you're trying to do here, which is, build a company and raise money for it, right? And I think that's, if you are going to have a slide about the founders, that you should always have, otherwise, there is a problem on it, right? What you should try to kind of highlight, and also whether you have a complementary team that covers, everything, right? Versus, not necessarily focus on the things that maybe you're not doing so well. But it's very, it's really by example what this will look like.
Sure. And Sven, what do you tell founders?
So, don't be as shy. I have lots of very, very technical founders, and often they're a little bit shy putting their accomplishments on paper. So that's one thing that I tell them. To focus on the things that are really relevant to the project that you're running, to the company that you're building. And then 3, don't go too far on the other end and kind of overstate the case, because one of the evaluation loops that's running in every investor's head is, well, this is the person I'm going to work with for a long time, potentially. And so I would like a very truthful, honest work relationship that doesn't. So this means, like, don't overstate the case where it is kind of ridiculous, but have some fortitude to highlight your accomplishments. And it's this balance between both of those things.
What do you mean overstate the case? Like the market size or the opportunity?
No, it is that too, but this was a little bit more on the personal accomplishments side. Mm-hmm. So almost everybody, in particular in early stage investing, where a lot of it hinges on the founder, very quickly you will just call a bunch of people in the industry and just find out, okay, so what did he or she really do in this company, and so on. And if that is not quite the same as it was portrayed, that just doesn't go very well. So that doesn't mean, like, be too humble, but at the same time, be truthful. I actually find it also absolutely okay to be truthful about areas that are maybe important areas for the company that you have less experience with. I'd much rather have that out up front, and so we can help build the company, than to basically state that you have a lot of experience in it when truthfully really you don't.
That's good insight. Let's skip the next slide, because we're running out of time here. Unless there's anything particular you want to talk about, Raquel, about the team, or if we can go into the problem slide.
Yeah, I think, for the team I mentioned before, right, what was important for, to convey is that it's not just the founder, which, these days the founder is very important, right? And that's what we saw as well. But, you have an idea of, a vision of what you want to solve, but are you equipped to solve it? Right. And these days it's extremely hard to find AI talent. And this was AI on steroids from day one. Right. Mm-hmm. So that, was a team of, 30, 40 people already on day one. And that, that resonated very, very well. Right. And, sort of showcase their innovation and showcase that, they also build production systems. So that was important, given my research hat as well, to make sure that people understood that I'm not just a professor that has crazy ideas. I actually build products that solve real problems. And that's, kind of why the highlight is on that front as well. And what is on the pitch deck here is, from the beginning to where we are now is, if I wanted to pitch again, so now we have, experts from almost every single self-driving company. We have, a lot of, amazing leaders, right? So we have a very well-rounded team, and that will be kind of the next generation of the team pitch.
The logos in the bottom right there'd be more of them, right? Is that what you're saying? Yes. It seems to me you're quite good at recruiting. What's your secret with recruiting?
Yeah. So we are definitely, pretty happy with how recruiting is going, and I think it resonates really well with everybody. People are unhappy with to the point of maybe leaving the industry with progress. It's like it's too slow. We are not getting there. I don't see a path of success, right? And then sort of bringing our new approach and why we are doing the things that we are doing, and how fast we are also progressing, resonates incredibly with every single candidate, regardless whether they come from hardware, software, business perspective, etc. So that's our plus the team and who is in part of the company right now is extremely excited. But definitely we are nicely growing and very, very excited.
Nicely growing, it's an understatement. Let's look at the next slide. The problem slide. This one's interesting to me because it's the first one with the real illustration. And at the bottom, you illustrate the problem. I was hoping you could talk us through that.
Sure. So the way to think about this slide is, it's really highlighting the problems with the sort of traditional hand engineer approach, right? And the fact that, and we talked a little bit already today, right? And the fact that it's really difficult to make progress, and how instead of trying to solve the core problems, then you just add more people, add more code, add more of the stuff, and then you keep on growing, and you don't have a good way to really tune that software stack to handle the difficulty of all the cases and scenarios, right? And the second kind of problem with the way that things are developed right now is this need and reliance to just drive millions of miles in the real world to catch issues, right? That's something that is not the safest approach. It's extremely definitely not cost efficient, right? And again, requires very, very large teams, right? So that's kind of the two sort of issues that we see, and we can go. There is this slide. It was a slide that works for people that don't have a lot of knowledge about self-driving, and works also for people like Sven,
yes,
where we can go deeply into exactly where in the stack we have issues, as an industry.
I think this slide, it does work very well for people that do not have deep knowledge like me. And I think that illustrates how successful you are at storytelling, right? If you can take that complex idea and distill it down into how many boxes are there? 7 boxes? That makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah, so one of my advice to founders is to spend a lot of time preparing the deck before you pitch. And that was my approach. Is not I start pitching and then kind of try to get a deck based on how conversations are going, but spend the time into distilling a complex idea into something that, regardless of the background of the investor, will resonate, will be exciting. And that's non-trivial when you have a lot of it is about the technical approach, right? And this is kind of next-gen technical approach. So right. You still need to. So there were, I guess, some analogies and things that help maybe along the way with investors that were not super technical like Sven into something.
Yes. And Sven, you were nodding along there.
Yeah, I think the art of storytelling is really, really important in a pitch deck like that. So that you can take away 1 or 2 messages, ideally just one per slide, very, very simply, even though it is the underlying issue might actually be technically complex. And I think Raquel has done like a really good job here. And the net, for example, from a slide like that, if you read it on 30,000 feet, is, well, traditionally, the more code we write, the slower the progress gets. That's the problem of the industry. And then there's a whole bunch of things you can unpack beneath that, and you can go as deep as you want in the conversation. But it's easy to distill the message from these slides.
We're running out of time here, so I gotta wrap this up shortly. But I was curious. Your first Series A was 82 million. You raised it last year. The markets are a mess right now. But how much are you looking to raise this year?
First, you're assuming I'm raising this year, and
I am. I saw the amount of people you just recently hired, and those people are expensive. So I'm thinking you need to raise some more.
So obviously, at some point we need to raise some more. Not necessary right now. It's important that when you are about to raise money, you do it in the right time, so that you maximize the probability of the outcome being something of what you wanted to do in the first place. So that would be my advice for other folks. And right now the markets are not great, so it's not necessarily the best idea in general for everybody. But yes, also make sure that you have enough runway so that you are not worrying about fundraising every 6 months, because that will prevent you from also executing in the vision and the things that you're trying to build. And in my I guess my role at Waabi is also very, very technical, so I need to spend enough cycles on that. So it's important that when I spend cycles in fundraising, it's at the right time for the the right reasons.
Yes, and it seems to me that you need to lead the company, right? That's what you're saying. So not just the runway. You got to lead the company as well. Sven, any last words here before we run?
No, not particularly.
I really appreciate it. And you two have a fantastic relationship. How do you guys get along with disagreements?
This is the point I was trying to make a little bit earlier, this sort of honesty. This is the person you're going to work with for a long time. And I expect this to be true with Raquel too. So it is really important that we have an honest enough relationship where, if something is wrong, we talk about it in an open way. Actually, the things that are wrong are the things that we should focus on. And so those are the things we talk about first. If there are different ideas, it's an honest exchange of ideas, and that it's allowed to have pushback, for example, on ideas and figure out what's the best solution to this. So this transparency and honesty part is a really, really important part of this relationship, in my view.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really good. We haven't heard that before in TechCrunch Live, and I think that's so important. Well, what we're going to do now is we're ending this session, and we're going into a live session called Pitch Practice, and you two are going to stick around and help us with this. So we have 3 different companies that were selected from the audience just recently. They have no deck, and they're just going to come on, talk to us for 2 minutes, give us their elevator pitch, and then 4 minutes of feedback from the 3 of us. So with that said, we're going to bring on the first person. His name is Chess, and he's from D-Risk. Chess, are you there? I see you, and if you can turn on your...
Affirmative.
Yes, great. If you can turn on your camera. Nice to meet you, sir.
It's great to meet you. And Sven, great to meet you. Raquel, it's great to meet you. We're a huge fan here at D-Risk of what you've done and what you're doing right now. You're right on. We've thought that a better than rule-based system based on something like learning was clearly the right way to go. So, all right. Thanks.
Well, let's reset that clock. And then I'm going to give you 2 minutes starting now.
All right. First of all, can you hear me? Did you hear anything I just said?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, great. So again, Raquel, huge fan. Like you, we thought that simulation and of course some non-rule-based learning approach was going to be the right thing. We also thought there was an important third part of the problem. So knowing what to simulate. We went to the government of the United Kingdom, who had a call for funding a few years ago on making a driver's test for self-driving cars. And we said, more important than just simulation is knowing what to simulate. They said, you're right. And they gave us a grant to build this ultimate driver's test for self-driving cars based on edge cases. We've kind of been in stealth for 2 years, but we now have sort of 3 of the top 10 AV developers under contract. What we've been doing is selling them edge case data from our knowledge graph of risk, and they're finding that they can not only get better at the edge cases, but then get the center cases for free. So I'll actually just ask you, is that something that you feel like you might also need? And if so, are you interested in trying it?
Well, this is a first for TechCrunch Live, but go ahead, Raquel. Go ahead.
Well, Raquel, that's all you.
I love it. I guess
so. So the pitch itself was very direct, right? And generally, pitches sometimes they exclude the ask, and you were very forthcoming with the ask there.
Sure. Well, the most important thing is for me is to get Raquel's feedback and to hear what she has to say, and all of you. I mean, look, there's a lot on D-Risk. We've been sharing it with Intel for the last 2 days. There's a lot more to say. But ultimately, knowing whether you want to train on edge cases and get the center cases for free, if that's consistent with your philosophy, when you want to bring that in, some AV developers, we talked to them for 2 years before they're finally like, oh yeah, we want to try this methodology, this set of data. Is it interesting to you, perhaps now?
Cool. So I guess I will answer this since it was very direct. Yeah. So I think the problem that you are focusing on is a very important problem, and I think that's important in the pitch to first say, okay, this is what we are tackling, and this is why it's important, right? And then I think it's important that you also make a comparative to other techniques, approaches, industry players into why your approach is superior in some form to what they are offering, right? Whether it is that your edge cases are, cover more of the space, whether it is that they are somehow more realistic, whether, as you mentioned before, maybe is that you get edge cases, non-edge cases for free. So I think that would be great to see, as part of your pitch, and where, your knowledge graph, I guess, comes from, and why is, a very, very rich knowledge graph, and how potentially that can also grow over time. Like, what is the product today and where you are going sort of in the future.
A lot of that was playing right behind us as you were saying it. And those are great points. We're finding that compared to training on Kitty, if you train on edge case data, even just in simulation, you can get a 6 times improvement at recognizing the stuff that's going to come hit you in real life data. So like, you're about to be T-boned by something you can only just barely see from behind an occlusion. You retrain with the de-risk edge cases, you get much, much better at that. That's metonymy. It's one example. What do you think?
I mean, that sounds, like very, very interesting. And I will suggest that, since you seem to have metrics that actually back up sort of what you're saying, right? That you explain what those metrics are and why those metrics are important, and they are the right metrics in terms of validating simulation or the importance of your technology.
Okay.
Sven, any feedback?
One thing that I would maybe add to it is, what do your customers do after you surface these edge cases, and what's the time to resolution to make actual progress? So that would be an important metric to add to this, because it is useful to know, okay, you surface more edge cases that are interesting, but what happens then, and what's the value that really it generates to your customers? That's obvious to you. That might not be totally obvious to an investor that, for example, doesn't live in this space.
Well, right. They get in many fewer head-on collisions. That's one.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chester. We really appreciate you being on, and I hope you join us next week.
Awesome.
Nice meeting you.
All right. He took his shot. All right, Raven. The next one, we have Raven from Earth Rides. He's coming up. Raven, are you there? There you are. You can turn on your camera and your mic. We'll get going here.
Awesome. Let's do this. I'm Raven Hernandez and CEO of Earth Rides. Earth is an all-electric rideshare company in Tennessee and Texas. We've been around for 18 months and service over 200,000 passengers and offset over 300 tons of carbon emission. We're focused on tackling 2 problems. 1, an unsafe and poor experience for the rider, and 2, an inefficient and, quite frankly, non-transparent experience for the driver. So how we do that is we utilize employees. We have mostly 80% of our rides being done by employees and a fleet that we own. It's all electric, no hybrid, no gas. The other percentage of that is done by gig economy, similar to Uber and Lyft. We focus on having mixed margins with B2B and B2C. So our B2B margins are upwards of 50%, and those B2C are around 28%. That's how we focus on profitability, another issue within this space. As we move forward, we are focused on, with this next raise, which will be our Series A the end of this summer, that money will be utilized for an in-car experience. So having the UI helped better create financial literacy for the driver, and also predict at times if there will be a default on a payment and how to circumvent that default. Beyond that, again, in our first year, we've had great success, and we're looking to launch roughly 8 to 10 cities with this next raise.
That was very good. Thank you so much. Sven, let's start with you.
So I'm not entirely sure I understood the thing that you're building. So the app that you're building, when you were talking about financial literacy, can you explain it a little bit more?
Absolutely. So the rides have been just a vehicle to get us started and not have to raise a lot of money and be lean. So we do rides currently, and as we go towards growth, we are focused on a financial literacy component within the UI. So we'll be partnering with an OEM.
Drivers.
Yep.
For the drivers. Okay, got it. Okay, yeah. That makes more sense then. I think that's definitely a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, we'd like to think so, because we'll be able to better predict, and so those loans can be less predatory, better rates, and also more secure.
How do you think about scaling this company from city to city? You said you had a mix between B2B deals that you have and B2C parts. So how do you scale from city to city? So how does that work?
I love that question. We have 2 cities that are ready to go in the next 3 weeks with events. So we pilot and we focus on B2B instead of going into a city. I forgot to mention our CAC is less than $5 with an LTV of $80. So very, very, very affordable, because we do focus on relationships. So as we go into a new city, I will say, hey, what partners can we go ahead and tap into who need this service before we go in and spend a lot of money on marketing?
Okay, yeah, that makes quite a bit of sense. And tell me a little bit more about like the size of the company. You're still quite early, it seems, but you have done quite a bit with what you had at your disposal.
Yeah, lean and affordable is definitely where we come from. About internally 12 drivers, about 70 that are W-2, and then 1099 about 30.
Okay, got it. And what do you think you're going to need the most help with in the next round?
Everything that I don't know.
No, so, but like concretely, there's this business has lots of different facets, right? So what are the things that you think you're going to need the most help with?
Yeah, so my background, I finished law school and became licensed attorney at 23. So I'm very good at looking for what I don't know. And my thing is going to be juggling multiple markets and hiring the right people. I think that's where I'd like the most advice.
Okay. That's very good. Raquel, do you have any feedback?
Sorry, I was muted. Maybe a question, which is, continuing on the question of Sven, which is scaling the business. How do you see, as you add more and more cities, how you can be more and more efficient in both time as well as monetary, and how that plays a role into expanding,
Absolutely. Deadheading is a huge cost. Drivers, racking up insurance miles with no rides. And I think that's where you optimize routes. So we currently have delivery partners that we tap into as a driver is on the way to a remote location. We'll have some partners around that area to say, hey, 25% off if you go ahead and book a ride right now back into town, so we can tackle those deadhead miles.
And maybe last question, and to say as well that this was a great pitch, I think, that you delivered at the beginning. Which is, competition. Who are your biggest competitors, and how are you equipped to actually face that competition?
Absolutely. We're equipped. We're not equipped in the sense that we don't have access to unlimited capital. However, we're seeing with what, the last 2 weeks have brought about, that perhaps our biggest competitors also don't have access to unlimited capital. When it comes to growth, it's about profitability, and it's about being fiscally responsible. So as we continue to expand, it's going into markets with revenue already there, ready for us to go. I'd like to, be a unicorn and tap into a brand of Earth Carbon, Earth Rides, Earth Stations, but it starts with the rides, and that's where we're focused. And, in regards to our competitors, at the end of the day, we're focused on taking care of our drivers first, because they can take care of our riders. That's who interacts with our riders on a day-to-day basis. So I think we stick there, we'll be okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Raven. We're out of time with you, but I'll give you one piece of feedback myself. You speak with confidence and authority, and it works very, very well for you. Keep doing that.
Thank you, guys. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect.
Great. Thank you so much, Raven. All right. We have one more company. We have Hussein from Pork Chop. I love pork chops. Think about cooking those tonight. Hussein, are you there? I'm not seeing you in the Zoom yet. All right. There you are. If you can turn on your mic and your camera.
Yes, I am.
Hello, sir. All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm calling from the northern Sweden up here. It is almost 10 o'clock, so bear with me if it's really dark around me. And thank you for having me. Thank you, TechCrunch Plus, and everybody. Raquel, you're in my hometown of Toronto, which is great, and I'm just across the street from Vector. I used to work at Ryerson, so we're a little bit competitors there. And Sven, thank you so much for taking the time. So my name is Hussein, if I can get started.
Yeah.
My name is Hussein. I'm here for Pork Chop. We've been around since 2020 and have already gained space heritage. This is because we're a space infrastructure and satellite industry is at a thriving point of the innovation cycle. But as we know, there's a plague in the satellite and space industry, which is expendable satellites, which are affecting the economics and overall sustainability of the space environment. We believe that there is $1 trillion space economy in the coming decades, which is being built on top of to solve the problems of connectivity, climate change, and in-orbit services. However, this plague needs to be tackled right on and head straight. And we at Pork Chop are doing that by enabling companies to solve these problems through being a provider of space transportation. We are not Rocket Lab. We are not SpaceX. We are the next stage beyond that. We're providing a multi-purpose reusable space tug, which is rocket agnostic, which means that we can work with any satellite and any rocket company. And we're going to be doing that by using our proprietary space-proven technology and electric thrusters to make it easier to rendezvous with satellites. So we're offering last mile transportation and delivery services. And right now we're raising a seed round to scale our first demonstration and our commercial operations to serve the growing demand of Earth observation satellites and connectivity constellations. Thank you.
That was great. You had 20 seconds left too. Thank you for that. Sven, you're the space guy. Let's start with you.
Yeah, so full disclosure, we're one of the earliest investor in a company called Rocket Lab and Varda and a couple of other things. So this is a market I care about. Just a quick question. So you have a space tech. So do you do mostly orbit raising then for satellites? So we're doing something. Could you orbit raise, or what exactly does the tug do?
Yeah, we're doing multiple operations. We're starting off our operations with deploying satellites and performing orbit phasing and raising, and then we're going into last mile delivery services from LEO to MEO to GEO, and eventually have a program and the roadmap to perform in-orbit services, actually, which is refueling and working with companies like Varda to be able to provide on-orbit services.
Great. Yeah, I actually really like the way you laid out the pitch. There's a beginning part of the story, which might be orbit raising, something that's immediately useful to a whole bunch of different people. And then there's a longer vision of things that you can provide. And I know this is very difficult to bring across in 2 minutes all. So good job on that. One piece of feedback I would give is I would be pretty clear about the initial value that you're going to provide for the first set of customers. Mm-hmm. So, orbit raising would provide X amount of value for these types of customers. I would put that pretty front and center. And the other piece of feedback I would give is, this is not a trivial thing to do. Mm-hmm. You are literally doing rocket science. So, okay, so who's on your team? Why can you do this? Why you're well equipped to do that? I would have a couple of sentences in this as well. That would be my feedback. I know full well you only had 2 minutes, so there's probably a bunch that you didn't say, but that would be my direct feedback here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any feedback on this pitch?
Yeah, so I think this is an example of why having somebody on board like Sven is amazing, right? Because he can really understand all the technical intricacies that to help you build that company instead of you need to kind of explain things and then staying like super superficial. So I think we just witnessed this, and I guess space stuff is something that he really cares about. I was gonna say something very similar to Sven, which is this is a pretty difficult industry, so team and talent matters a lot. Try to add or maybe you can tell us about why you think that you are particularly equipped to do this.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with Canadian Space Agency on several missions, which essentially gives me the background to know that launching satellites can be a daunting task. And expensive, very, very expensive. And when you're thinking about launching constellations, that's even getting into the hundreds and the thousands of economic dollars that you can utilize to do something else. And we have a very versatile team, a lot of young talent, which essentially allows us to move really fast. And grow the team very quickly, and we've done that. It was just the 3 of us, and now we're up to 7, and we have a growth trajectory of getting to 20 before the end of the year. So
I have maybe one more thing that might be useful, which is maybe you can frame the alternatives really crisply. So
sure.
For example, I can go directly to the orbit, expend more fuel and have a more expensive ride, but I will be there very quickly, versus I have a much cheaper ride and then do a bunch of orbit raising after that. And that can be economically much better, but it has, I might arrive at that particular orbit a little bit later. And you kind of make the argument, well, for these loads, it doesn't matter. This is still the better solution. So really frame the alternatives as part of that, because you have thought about this obviously a lot. And so you can easily explain this to potential investors.
That's great feedback. And let's leave with that. Sven, Raquel, Hussein, thank you for joining us this week. I really appreciate it. This has been a great TechCrunch Live event, and I hope all of you can join us next week at TechCrunch Mobility. And if not, we'll be back the following week with a fantastic story. So thank you all again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.